So the fine fescues, as the name implies, definitely have a different leaf texture than some of the primary grasses that are used in Minnesota. The leaf width is much narrower, which provides for a much different look in the lawn. So I'm standing in front of a Kentucky bluegrass trial here. Kentucky bluegrass, when you think of grasses in Minnesota, you typically would think of Kentucky bluegrass. It's a great grass when the conditions are ideal. As you can see, there's a lot of variation for color. They look full. It's a very good grass, but this grass needs a lot of water, needs a fair amount of nitrogen fertility during the year to look good. So really, it's something that we don't recommend if you want a low input lawn, but nevertheless, it's something that people are used to. It's got a nice aesthetic characteristic. If you notice the difference in the leaf width, you'll see what I'm talking about. So Kentucky bluegrass has a wider leaf than fine fescues. The turf is a little more upright. One thing that'll happen with fine fescues, especially as the mowing height is raised, is they'll tend to lay over a little bit, and some people may not like that. But as you lower the mowing height, that's less of a problem. Other grasses that are used in more high input situations in Minnesota would include perennial ryegrass. Perennial ryegrass, once again, is going to have a coarser leaf texture, a wider leaf than fine fescues. Under ideal conditions, once again, it looks really good, but we often don't have those conditions. Perennial ryegrass, in fact, isn't very winter hardy at all. So fine fescues are extremely winter hardy. It's not a problem. But perennial ryegrasses typically are not going to survive multiple winters in Minnesota. So in terms of aesthetics, another problem with perennial ryegrass, in addition to winter hardiness, would be the fact that it gets very stemmy. So it shoots up reproductive tillers in the spring that produce seed heads, and you may sometimes see these seed heads in your lawn. But then what happens is when that seed head gets mowed off, that flowering stem dies and it just kind of sits there in the turf. So you can see that this kind of whitish appearance to the turf is really these stems that have been mowed off in the spring, and then they just stay there through the whole year. So there's another difference between these high input grasses and fine fescue. The fine fescues really don't have this problem that perennial ryegrass has with stemminess staying around throughout the whole season. Tall fescue is a grass we're seeing a little bit of an increase in use in Minnesota, and I would expect we'll continue to see more. So tall fescue, completely different species than the fine fescues. Tall fescue is a very coarse leaf texture. It has some nice low input attributes, and it looks much different than the fine fescues. You can see here that the tall fescue is very coarse. It's the coarsest of the cool season grasses that we would use in Minnesota, and it varies very much in leaf texture compared to the fine fescues.